I'm calling 911. You stole my internet. That was the actual outburst from the HOA president's kid, standing on my lakeside property, red-faced and yelling into his phone. The kid at 12 years old actually called emergency services because I wouldn't give him my Wi-Fi password. But here's the thing, when I was 8, I saw my father break down in tears as our family got fined relentlessly by our old HOA for years because our fence exceeded the allowed height by 2 inches. I promised myself back then that no one would ever push me around again, so when this pampered little tyrant tried to sic the police on me over internet access, let's just say the whole neighborhood got a front row seat to what happens when the wrong tech-savvy guy gets provoked. What followed was nothing short of outrageous. Welcome back to Echo Stories. This one, it's a wild ride. Drop a comment to let me know where you're tuning in from and stick around. You're going to want to hear this. See, my lakeside home office was supposed to be my retreat. After 3 years as a freelance web developer, I'd built the perfect rhythm, coffee on the deck, smooth 200 Mbps fiber connection, total quiet, so something I never got in the city. The HOA here, totally tolerable, nothing like the tyrants of my childhood. People mostly stayed in their own lane, lawns looked nice, home values stayed high, and no one had a clipboard obsession, until the Walsh family moved in. That's when things changed. Margaret Walsh, pardon me, Mrs. Walsh, as she demanded to be called, rolled into the neighborhood like a storm in a shiny black Lexus. Within a few days, she announced herself as the soon-to-be HOA president and started conducting her own personal inspections. I watched from my window as she paced from house to house, snapping photos of mailboxes and measuring flower beds with a tiny ruler. Then there was her son, Tyler, 12 years old, spoiled rotten, with golden hair and designer sneakers. The kid introduced himself to everyone by interrogating them about their gaming rigs and Wi-Fi speeds. That should have been the first red flag. It started off low-key. I was debugging a client's online store when I spotted movement by the hedge. Tyler was crouched just inside my neighbor's property line, clutching his iPhone and glaring at the screen like it owed him money. Obvious Wi-Fi scanning behavior. I stepped outside. Lose something, Tyler? He jumped like I'd caught him sneaking cookies. Oh, number. I was just a broken bar looking at the lake. It's nice from here. Sure, kid. The lake was just as visible from his own yard. Your phone picking up anything interesting? I asked. His face flushed. I don't know what you mean. I could literally see Miller Fiber 200 glowing on his screen from 6 feet away. The kid wasn't even trying to be slick. Look, Tyler, I said, if you're having trouble with internet, maybe ask your parents to upgrade your plan. But my Wi-Fi's off limits. He muttered something and wandered off, but the look he threw back said this wasn't over. 2 days later, he came to my door, charm mode fully activated, puppy eyes, polite tone, the whole act. Hi, Mr. Miller. I'm Tyler from across the street. I was wondering, a broken bar, could I borrow your Wi-Fi password, just for schoolwork and stuff? I almost respected the boldness. Sorry, Tyler, this connection's for work. I can't share it. He kept at it. But I really need it. My internet is slow, and I keep dropping during Zoom calls. I can't even watch YouTube without it buffering. Have you talked to your parents about upgrading? They said it's fine, but it's not. I can't play games with my friends without lag. Everyone's ahead of me. He hit me with excuse after excuse school projects, feeling left out, even social anxiety, all while dropping the nice kid act bit by bit. When I still said no, the gloves came off. You're being unfair, he snapped. Everyone else shares their Wi-Fi. My mom runs the HOA, you know. She makes sure people follow the rules. Ah, there it was, the not-so-subtle threat. I gave him a calm smile. Good to know. Say hi to your mom for me. Then I shut the door. Through the blinds, I watched him storm off and whip out his phone, probably calling his mom to report a grave Wi-Fi injustice. I didn't know just how far this would go, but I figured it was time to give a crash course in digital boundaries, because Tyler wasn't done. In fact, he escalated. First, he tried using a shady Wi-Fi hacking app to break into my network. Yes, really, He downloaded some random software and went full black hat wannabe. Ever had to deal with a neighborhood kid like this? Type entitled if you know the type and drop your most outrageous HOA story below. Tyler didn't back down. If anything, my refusal flipped some internal switch. The very next day, I saw him out walking his dog past my house, except the dog was on a 20-foot leash that just happened to pull him closer to my router's range. He spent 10 minutes pretending to clean up after a dog that hadn't done anything while tapping like mad on his phone. Day 2, a new approach. He placed an old iPad on their patio aimed right at my house. I checked my router logs that night. Sure enough, his iPad had been pinging my network every 30 seconds for 6 hours. By day 3, he brought in reinforcements. His friend Jake joined him for a study session on the lawn. The study materials, 2 laptops, 1 shared Wi-Fi cracking app, and 0 schoolwork. I caught it all on my security cam and started saving screenshots. What came next? Even crazier. Things really spiraled when Tyler took his campaign to the neighbors. I first caught wind of it during a casual Saturday lawn chat with Bill Rodriguez, who lives next door. "Hey Alex," he said, trimming his hedges. "That Walsh kid stopped by asking about our internet setup. Said your Wi-Fi might be interfering with the whole street." The what? Turns out Tyler had been making the rounds, planting seeds of suspicion like a junior propaganda machine. Mrs. Milra no relation? Despite the Namia said he'd asked if she'd noticed any strange networks showing up recently. The Patels told me he'd asked about their connection speeds and if they'd experienced any recent slowdowns. He was 12, and already running a classic disinformation play like a pro-spin doctor. The final straw came when I overheard him talking to Mr. Morrison, the retired engineer and unofficial tech guru of the neighborhood. "I think the guy across the street is doing some kind of hacker stuff," Tyler said, loudly enough that I heard him from inside my garage. "My mom says people who work from home sometimes do illegal things on their computers. And his Wi-Fi name is, like, super weird." Miller Fiber 200 was weird? Sure, kid. To Morrison's credit, he wasn't buying it. "Son, that just means he's got fast fiber internet." Perfectly normal. But Tyler wouldn't let it go. "Yeah, but if it's normal, why won't he share it? My mom says everyone in good neighborhood shares their Wi-Fi. It's polite." That was it. Time for a little tech-fueled lesson in manners. If Tyler wanted to keep scanning my Wi-Fi, I'd make sure he got an eyeful. Day 1 of my counteroffensive, I changed my network name to Tyler_stop_lurking. Subtle? Not really. Effective? Instantly. I caught the reaction through my blinds. Tyler checked his phone, saw the new name, and sprinted back inside. 5 minutes later, Margaret Walsh emerged on her porch, arms folded and staring at my house like she was trying to melt it with her eyes. Day 2. Ask_your_mom_for_internet. Day 3. No_Wi-Fi_for_cartons. Day 4. Tyler_needs_a_hobby. Each day's name change sparked increasingly dramatic family conferences in their kitchen. I had a perfect view of Tyler gesturing wildly while Margaret's face turned more sour by the hour. But my _diaresis_ra_ copyright assistance came on day 5. Next_Tyler_calls_911. It was meant as a joke, a playful jab at the ridiculous escalation. I mean, what kind of kid would actually call the emergency line over internet access? Apparently, the exact kind I was dealing with. But before we get to that glorious moment, Tyler decided to fire one last warning shot. That evening, standing on his front lawn, he launched into a monologue loud enough for the entire block. "My mom's the HOA president. She knows the chief of police. If you don't stop being mean and give me the password, I'm reporting you for cyberbullying." I stepped onto my porch. "You're reporting me to who exactly?" "The police." "This is harassment," he yelled. "You're targeting me. You made your Wi-Fi names mean on purpose. That's illegal or something." He meant it. This kid had somehow convinced himself that not sharing private internet access was some kind of crime. But trying to force someone to give up their secure connection? Totally normal in Tyler's world. I walked back inside, shaking my head, and updated my router's name one more time. 911_is_not_IT_support. Turns out a broken bar. I spoke too soon, because the next day, Tyler made sure to prove me wrong in spectacular fashion, and yes, he actually dialed 911. Think I'm exaggerating? Type "no way" in the comments, and tell me what would you have renamed your Wi-Fi if you were in my shoes. Looking back, I should have known the kid would take my trolling as a personal dare. Tyler had never encountered a boundary he couldn't bulldoze using a mix of whining and maternal authority. It all blew up on a Tuesday morning. I was elbows deep in code, debugging a nasty shopping cart bug for a client, when I heard sirens. At first, I figured it was a medical call, maybe someone's home alarm going off. Then the cruiser stopped right in my driveway. Two officers stepped out, clearly not thrilled to be there. One of them, Officer Martinez, checked his notes with a kind of expression reserved for stories you already don't believe. I opened the door before they could knock. "Mr. Miller?" he asked wearily. "We received a 911 report of internet theft and possible cyber harassment." I blinked. "I'm sorry, a what?" He glanced at his notepad. The caller claimed a neighbor was stealing Wi-Fi and harassing him online through offensive network names. He considered it an emergency because he couldn't finish schoolwork or contact friends. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sight of two cops at my door over Wi-Fi was just too absurd. "You came here because a 12-year-old doesn't have the password to my router?" "Sir, we're required to respond to all 911 calls. Could you explain your side of things?" Before I could, Margaret Walsh came marching across the street like she'd been rehearsing this moment. Slightly out of breath, but radiating authority, she launched into her prepared speech. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," she began. "My son Tyler has been the target of repeated digital harassment by this man. He's being excluded from vital online resources and subjected to hostile messages via Wi-Fi networks." Officer Martinez looked puzzled. "Online resources?" "Well, not officially community internet," Margaret backtracked, "but in most neighborhoods, people share their Wi-Fi. It's common courtesy." "Mr. Miller is intentionally denying my son access, and then taunting him through passive-aggressive network names." I pulled out my phone and opened the router admin screen for the officers. "Here are my private networks," I said, scrolling through the settings. "I pay for this service. Nothing requires me to hand the password to anyone." Margaret jumped in before they could reply, voice rising a notch. "Tyler has learning challenges," she insisted. "He needs reliable internet for school apps and social growth. Excluding him like this is damaging his mental health." Officer Kim, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. "Ma'am, was it your son who placed the 911 call?" "Technically, yes, but this isn't just about Wi-Fi," she said, grasping for authority. "It's neighborhood harassment, digital bullying." Kim turned to me. "Have you threatened the boy, or tried to access their devices?" "Absolutely not," I answered. "Our only conversations were me refusing to share the password and those network names he mentioned." I showed them the list. Tyler_stop_lurking, ask_your_mom_for_internet, and 911_is_not_customer_service, all broadcasting from gear sitting inside my own walls. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. "Ma'am, 911 is for life or death situations. Internet spats don't qualify. A Macron false 911 calls, however, are illegal. They tie up first responders," Kim added. "We once missed a heart attack alert because we were chasing down a noise complaint about wind chimes." Margaret's iron composure faltered. "Tyler's just a child. He didn't understand." "He's old enough to dial," Martinez said evenly, "so he's old enough to learn consequences." He turned back to me. "You're under no obligation to share your connection. Provocative SIDS aren't criminal, either." Kim faced Margaret again. "We still have to document the misuse of 911 and explain proper emergency procedure." Across the street, Tyler peeked from behind their porch post and ducked out of sight when the officers noticed. "Tyler," Margaret barked, front and center. He trudged over, all swagger gone. Martinez crouched to eye level. "Did you call 911? Tyler nodded, staring at his shoes. "What did you think the emergency was?" "He broken bar. He won't give me the Wi-Fi password," the boy muttered. Kim's tone softened but stayed firm. 911 is for real danger of fires, robberies, medical crises, not homework problems. But I couldn't do my assignment, he whispered. That's something to settle with your parents and your school, Martinez said, standing. We're filing this as improper 911 usage. Future non-emergency calls could lead to fines or charges. Margaret's face turned ashen. Officers, surely this is just a misunderstanding. Emergency lines save lives, Kim replied. Each minute spent on a non-issue is a minute taken from someone who is dying. They handed her a pamphlet on appropriate 911 use and neighborhood conflict resolution, offered me an apologetic handshake, and left. I watched from the porch while Margaret gave Tyler the scolding of his life. You'd think that humiliation would close the chapter, but later, through my window, I saw her pacing the kitchen, phone to ear, gesturing sharply toward my house. She wasn't retreating, she was planning the next volley. Little did I know, the 911 audio was about to become local legend. Dispatch had to ask Tyler 3 times to repeat his emergency before they realized a 12-year-old wanted police response because a neighbor wouldn't share Wi-Fi. So, you're saying the emergency is that your neighbor won't give you a password? The dispatcher asked, disbelief dripping from every word. Yes, and my homework's due, and my friends are online. Tyler had answered with life or a death urgency. Martinez later admitted the patrol car debated whether to roll at all, but policy forces a response to every call, no matter how absurd. We've had loud music complaints, barking a dog calls, even one about late pizza, he told me. But Wi-Fi denial? That's a first. Their report is now required reading at the Police Academy's section on 911 abuse. As the cruiser disappeared down the road, vindication mingled with worry. Tyler had tasted real consequences, yet Margaret clearly viewed this as round one. Sure enough, the next morning a formal complaint was taped to my front door on whole letterhead, signed by President Margaret Walshaw, summoning me to an immediate hearing for disruptive and harassing behavior toward minors. She wasn't backing off, she just upgraded to official paperwork, and I still had a few tech tricks she hadn't even imagined. Time to show Margaret what real escalation looks like. The irony of her filing a harassment complaint after her kid summoned the police over my private Wi-Fi was almost poetic. And it sparked an idea. If she wanted to play the official paperwork game, I could play it better. I had receipts for every encounter, full color security cam footage, and now a police report proving her family had wasted emergency resources. Some battles, Margaret, are best left alone. Think that public shaming would make a true Karen retreat? Please, drop karma in the comments if you believe Tyler finally tasted a little justice. And tell me, what's the silliest reason someone dialed 911 in your town? That evening, after the patrol car disappeared and the Walsh household slammed into damage control mode, I settled on my deck with a cold beer and my laptop, gazing at the lake while the gears turned. A 12-year-old escalated all the way to 911 for Wi-Fi. The entitlement was mind-blowing. Worse was Margaret doubling down, casting me as the villain instead of scolding her kid for clogging emergency lines. Clearly, they lived behind hope privilege so long they believed minor annoyances deserved armed response. Fine, time for a master class in cause and effect. I cracked open my Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro. This thing could do far more than run a standard home network. With the right tweaks, I could turn the neighborhood's wireless landscape into a labyrinth of perfectly legal, entirely deniable, and laser-focused on a single address. Step 1. Map the airwaves. Most neighbors relied on default ISP gear as Finity gateways, AT modems, maybe a bargain bin Netgear, all parked on the busiest 2.4A Macron GHZ channels, 1,A Macron 6,A Macron 11, and a sprinkling of unguarded 5A Macron GHZ. Security? Bare bones PA2. Ideal conditions. Step 2. Hardware run. 2 days and about $800 later, Operation Router Wall was born. 6 enterprise-grade access points ringed my property, positioned for maximum signal havoc. The beauty? I wasn't hacking or jamming anybody. I was merely exercising my right to broadcast on public frequencies. That my broadcasts would mire their gear in interference HOA, that was nothing but coincidence. Each AP spewed a roster of troll SIDs designed for maximum psychological sting. Tyler_911_helpdesk, Margaret_control_your_kid, call_the_cops_for_this, Karen_customer_service, 911_operator_please_hold. Every bogus network looked legit, proper security flags, believable captive portals that popped up and went nowhere. Phones and consoles would see dozens of available signals, connect, and promptly stall. My real networks ran hidden on carefully chosen channels untouched by my own chaos, so my connection stayed flawless. Placement mattered. An afternoon with a spectrum analyzer let me carve dead zones that wrapped the Walsh house in digital fog while sparing neighbors I actually liked. Bill Rodriguez could still stream on his back patio. The friendly Patel's home office hummed on. But inside the Walsh residence, welcome to the Stone Age. Saturday, I flipped the switch. Tyler was practicing kickflips in the driveway when it hit. First, his Spotify cut out. He stared at the phone, tapped, held it overhead like a divining rod. Next, I saw him inside. Xbox controller limp while an endless loading screen mocked him. His console kept latching on to networks that promised bandwidth and delivered purgatory. Then Margaret's smart home empire toppled. Doorbell offline. Security cams dead, sprinklers silent, even her fancy thermostat lost the plot, freezing the house at whatever temperature it was when the blackout began. By midday, I could hear her through open windows, raging at the Comcast rep. No, nothing works. The whole block has no internet. Rep, our diagnostics show your line is healthy. Ma'am, have you power recycled the router? The line was fine. Of course, her gear just couldn't cling to a stable signal amid my orchestrated storm. Soon she was outside, phone held aloft, wandering the yard like a Wi-Fi refugee trying to sniff out a clean channel. Meanwhile, Tyler had slid from frustration to meltdown. His friends all online, playing some new multiplayer game and plastering their victory screenshots all over social media, while poor Tyler was trapped in what I liked to call analog exile. From inside their house, I could hear him wailing, "Mom, fix the internet. I can't even watch YouTube." Now, I'll admit my setup wasn't flawless. A few innocent neighbors were definitely caught in the digital crossfire. Sweet Mrs. Patterson had to call her grandson for tech support, and old Mr. Morrison looked completely baffled trying to troubleshoot his frozen Netflix screen. I didn't feel great about that, so I made adjustments, tweaked the power levels, adjusted the access points angles, and carved out small Wi-Fi safe zones around households I knew relied on stable internet, especially those with remote work or medical devices. But the Walshes, they stayed smack in their blast radius. By evening, Margaret had called Comcast no less than 4 times, at tea twice, and even attempted to escalate things through the city's IT department, claiming there was a regional infrastructure failure. Each time, the response was the same: no outages. No problems. Her line was fine. The issue, on her end. That's when she finally made a move I'd been anticipating. An emergency home meeting notice appeared on the community forum. Urgent. Infrastructure failure affecting multiple homes. HOA to investigate source of interference. I grinned. It was time to roll out phase 2 of my neighborhood education plan. What followed over the next few days could only be described as a comedy of suburban chaos. Tyler descended into full-on internet withdrawal. I watched from my window as he paced the lawn like a digital addict denied his fix, phone in hand, scanning the skies for a miracle signal. He even climbed up onto their roof with a tablet at one point. Margaret had to call the fire department to get him down. Yes, another emergency call, this one for the kid who called 911 over Wi-Fi. The irony was chef's kiss. Meanwhile, Margaret had rebranded herself as a full-time neighborhood cyber investigator. She'd acquired a Wi-Fi analyzer and was now wandering around the block with it like she was investigating corporate espionage. Every hour, she'd sweep through, recording signal graphs, taking furious notes like some suburban CSI tech analyst. But what truly made the whole thing delicious was watching her suffer in silence, Her once flawless smart home badge of superiority was now a disconnected mess. She was manually adjusting her thermostat like it was 1992. Her smart fridge lost its connection and couldn't send snack alerts about Tyler's late-night raids. Her doorbell camera, offline. No more spying on joggers or mailbox deliveries. And through it all, she had no clue that the man she tried to paint as a villain who she got the police involved with over a Wi-Fi password was the very person behind her digital downfall. Then came the best part. Margaret scheduled an emergency home meeting to find the saboteur. But what would happen when I showed up offering to help solve the very problem I'd created? Type genius if you think the revenge was perfect, and tell me, have you ever wanted to mess with a bad neighbor's internet? The emergency home meeting was set for Thursday night at the community center, but Margaret was visibly unraveling well before then. She was in full panic mode, patrolling the neighborhood like a frazzled Wi-Fi bounty hunter, phone in one hand, clipboard in the other. She'd knock on doors, ask leading questions, and wave signal screenshots around like she was leading a federal investigation. The best part? She wasn't wrong. There was interference. She just couldn't prove it came from me. Then, Tuesday afternoon, she knocked on my door. "Alex," she began, clipboard ready, trying to sound composed. "I'm sure you've noticed the widespread internet issues in the neighborhood." "Can't say I have," I replied honestly. "My connection's been solid." "Really?" she asked, tightening her grip on the clipboard. "No slowdowns? No device issues?" "Nope. Maybe your plan needs an upgrade," I said with a smile. Her eye twitched. "It's not the plan. There's external interference, deliberate, I believe. I'm documenting affected homes for Thursday's home meeting." "Well," I offered, "let me know if you need technical advice. I do IT consulting." The look she gave me could have curdled milk. Thursday evening arrived. I walked into the community center with my laptop and the calm, helpful expression I used in client pitches. 15 neighbors had shown up, confused, concerned, and curious. At the front stood Margaret, next to a projector screen displaying her presentation, "Critical Infrastructure Security Threats to Our Community." She had gone full conspiracy theorist. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice urgent and commanding, "our neighborhood is under digital attack." She clicked through slides of Wi-Fi analyzer screenshots, graphs, maps of imaginary interference zones, all impressive looking, all basically meaningless. "This is no minor issue," she continued. "It's a targeted sabotage of our digital systems. My family has been particularly affected, coincidentally, I believe, after a recent enforcement dispute." She was referencing Tyler's 911 stunt without admitting the full story. "I propose 2 actions. First, we require all residents to register any high-powered wireless devices. Second, we allow surprise inspections of properties suspected of housing interference equipment." Gasps, grumbles. Nobody liked that idea, especially the part about random home inspections. Margaret had clearly misjudged the room. That's when I raised my hand. "Mrs. Walsh, if I may," I said, standing with my laptop in hand. "I actually brought some diagnostic tools with me. I'd be happy to run a wireless survey and help identify the problem, if everyone's open to that." Her face cycled through shock, suspicion, and something dangerously close to panic. She couldn't refuse my offer without looking defensive, but she clearly hated that I was inserting myself. "That's very broken bar thoughtful, Alex," she said tightly. "What exactly do you propose?" "Simple scan," I replied, flipping open my laptop. "We can map signal strength, identify anomalies, and maybe trace the source. 5 minutes should do." Margaret nodded, but her eyes said it all. She knew she was walking straight into a trap and there was no graceful way out. Before I even stepped into the meeting, I used my phone to remotely disable every single piece of my interference setup. Router wall went silent. 6 enterprise-grade access points were now just very expensive, completely inert hardware broadcasting absolutely nothing. At the community center, I connected my laptop to the building's Wi-Fi, launched a professional-grade analyzer, and mirrored my screen to the projector for all to see. The results popped up instantly. "Huh," I said, frowning thoughtfully at the display like I just uncovered a minor mystery. All wireless channels are operating normally. Signal strength is solid. No anomalies or interference patterns. I flipped through a few more diagnostics. Clean, stable, boring. Absolutely nothing that suggested sabotage. Mrs. Walsh, I said, looking up, when was the last time you noticed the issue? Margaret fumbled with her phone. Just this afternoon. Tyler couldn't connect to anything. I ran another scan. Still nothing unusual. Everything looks stable on every major frequency band. If there was interference, it's gone now. A low murmur spread through the room. Neighbors checked their phones and started nodding. Their internet was working perfectly now. Margaret's PowerPoint, a once dramatic, now absurd, hung behind her like the punchline to a joke no one laughed at. It's possible, I offered helpfully, that your ISP resolved a temporary issue behind the scenes. Sometimes these things just fix themselves after a firmware push or a routing table update. I shut my laptop and slipped it back into my bag while Margaret stood frozen in disbelief, watching her digital doomsday theory collapse in real time. Glad I could help clear that up, I said with a polite nod. Let me know if anyone else needs help troubleshooting. Always happy to assist. And just like that, the emergency meeting dissolved into confused whispers and half-hearted goodbyes. Neighbors filed out, some annoyed at the wasted time, others clearly starting to question Margaret's judgment. I left with a smile, drove home, and the moment I parked in my driveway, I pulled out my phone and reactivated every single piece of router wall. Tyler's digital blackout resumed immediately. You'd think that after being thoroughly embarrassed in front of the entire neighborhood, Margaret might have backed off, but what happens when a full-blown Karen is publicly humiliated? She declares war. Type gotcha if you saw that trap coming. And seriously, what would you do if you were Margaret in that moment? By Friday, her retaliation campaign was already in full swing. The first violation notice appeared taped to my front door. Violation of Community Aesthetic Standards A Section 4.2.7. Offense: electronic equipment visible from a public area. Violation: your laptop is visible through a window. Fine: $300. Yes, my laptop, inside my house, seen through glass. I submitted a written appeal, citing the rule's clear reference to outdoor installations. Margaret rejected it within 24 hours. Saturday: violation of residential zoning compliance A Section 8.1.3. Offense: commercial activity in a residential zone. Violation: home-based freelance IT work. Fine: $500. Half the block works remotely, but suddenly my home office was a zoning issue. Sunday's notice was almost impressive. Violation of noise ordinance A Section 6.4.4.1. Offense: excessive electronic noise during quiet hours. Violation: mechanical keyboard. Fine: $200. Apparently, Tyler had complained that my keyboard clicking was so loud it disturbed his sleep. A broken bar from across the street, a broken bar through closed windows. But Margaret's real act of sabotage was far more strategic and harder to fight. She took to the digital streets, the Nextdoor app, the HOA forum, the local Facebook groups. Carefully worded posts that never named me directly, but left zero doubt about who she meant. Has anyone else had a negative experience with local freelance IT providers? Just a reminder to verify credentials, as some home-based services may not be properly licensed. Concerned about potential data security issues from unverified operators in our neighborhood, the smear campaign had begun. Within days, my Google business profile was flooded with vague one-star reviews. Unprofessional behavior, didn't seem to know what he was doing, shady and rude. No specific complaints, just enough to start sowing doubt. My client lead slowed. Referrals dried up. The damage wasn't huge, but it was real. Margaret had figured out how to hit where it actually hurt: reputation. But what Margaret didn't realize was that she just crossed into territory I knew better than anyone: information systems, metadata, and digital footprints. She wanted to play dirty online? Fine. Next up, a digital audit trail she couldn't scrub clean. A broken bar of every procedural rule in the book. I interrupted, my voice calm but loud enough for the room to quiet. I believe the community deserves to hear how nearly $5,000 of their dues vanished into your landscaping and phantom Wi-Fi upgrades." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She looked to the board members for backup, but none of them would meet her gaze. I projected a spreadsheet onto the screen of dates, invoice numbers, line items, and payment recipients, all linked back to Margaret's address and her brother-in-law's so-called landscaping business. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Next came screenshots from the HOA website's meeting archive showing empty vote logs for every expenditure over $500. According to the bylaws, I continued, flipping to the highlighted passage, no individual, not even the HOA president, can approve spending above this threshold without a member vote. Yet these authorizations bear only one signature, hers. Margaret took a step forward. "This is out of context," I cut her off. "So is $1,800 disappearing into infrastructure upgrades with no documentation and no visible improvements, unless the infrastructure in question is your personal Netflix connection." Nervous laughter broke out across the room. The dam had cracked. "I'm not the only one who's been targeted," I said, motioning toward a small stack of papers beside me. 8 families have signed statements about fabricated violations and improper fines. People fined for Christmas lights, backyard tomatoes, even for receiving mail. This isn't about community standards, it's about control. Margaret was turning red now, clutching her clipboard like a life raft in a hurricane. "She's proposing tonight to codify this behavior, stricter rules, more fines, even surprise inspections of our private property. If we don't act now, this abuse becomes policy." That was the moment the tide turned. One by one, neighbors stood up, as some hesitant, others furious. "This is ridiculous," said Mr. Rodriguez. "I thought I was the only one," said Sarah Martinez. "She fined me for garden plants," added Mrs. Patel. "Tomatoes?" A soft chant started in the back. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" I held up the petition. "We have more than the required signatures for a recall vote. I move to suspend Margaret Walsh pending the outcome of a formal community election." "All in favor?" Hands shot up, one after another. Nearly every hand in the room went skyward. Margaret stood frozen in place as the secretary, looking both nervous and relieved, confirmed the vote met the required threshold. Effective immediately, her powers were suspended. A new interim committee would be formed by the end of the week. I packed up my laptop as the meeting turned into a spontaneous celebration. Margaret slinked out the side door, muttering to herself, completely ignored by the community she once ruled like a petty tyrant. Type justice if you think she had it coming. Have you ever witnessed a power-hungry neighbor get dethroned? That night, I sat on my deck again, beer in hand, staring out at the lake. My network interference gear stayed powered off. The war was over. Tyler could have his Wi-Fi back. As for me, I finally had my peace. But just in case Margaret ever tried to come back, router wall was still fully operational. I clicked to the first slide. "Tonight, we're not just discussing agenda items, we're confronting a misuse of power." The room fell completely still. "Your HOA president," I said calmly, "has spent over $5,000 in community funds without the required member approval. She's issued violation notices that contradict our own bylaws and weaponized her position to carry out personal vendettas." Slide by slide, I laid out the receipts of financial reports, screenshots of emails, blatant procedural violations. With every new piece of evidence, Margaret seemed to shrink behind the podium. "This is a smear campaign," she finally shouted. "Alex Miller has been harassing my family for weeks. He's the one interfering with our internet and targeting my son." That's when Bill Rodriguez interjected dryly. "Didn't your son call 911 because he couldn't get Wi-Fi?" The room burst into uneasy chuckles. By now, everyone had heard about the infamous emergency call. "I also have a petition," I said, holding it up, "signed by 9 households requesting a recall election, which meets the requirements to call an immediate vote." Margaret tried to argue, but Sarah Martinez stood. "I second the motion for recall." Third. The Patels chimed in. I raised my voice. "All in favor of a no-confidence vote against President Walsh." Hands shot up across the room. Margaret's face went pale as she tried to count 17 for recall, 3 against, 3 abstentions. "The motion passes," I said clearly. Margaret Walsh is hereby removed as HOA president, effective immediately. She didn't say a word, just packed up her papers and walked out. Tyler, lingering by the door, trailed behind her, eyes low. The room erupted the moment they left. $3,000 for her garden, Bill muttered. And she fined me over Christmas lights. We almost moved, Mrs. Patel added. Every week, some ridiculous citation. Thank you for standing up. Sarah stepped forward. This is why we need real oversight and transparency. No more secrecy, no more abuse disguised as policy. As the meeting wrapped, Tyler returned quietly and approached me. Mr. Miller, he said, voice soft. I'm sorry about the whole 911 thing. I just wanted to play with my friends. He looked genuinely remorseful and not the entitled kid I'd first met. I nodded. It's okay, Tyler, but next time, maybe ask instead of calling the cops. He nodded and jogged off to catch up with his mom. We elected Sarah Martinez as interim president. That night, the board threw out every bogus violation notice and began rebuilding the HOA into something that actually served the community. When I got home, I sat on my deck with a coffee and shut down my entire interference system. One by one, signals across the neighborhood grew stronger. The digital noise was gone. It felt like the ecosystem was finally healing. As the sun lit the lake in gold, I realized, this wasn't just a victory over Margaret, it was justice for everyone she'd trampled. That morning, I renamed my Wi-Fi one last time. Problem solved. I disabled the interference rig for good. Tyler never asked for Wi-Fi again. Margaret avoided me entirely. And the HOA? It started working like a real community. No more fines for imaginary violations. No more dictatorships hidden behind clipboards. As for me, I kept my peaceful lakeside workspace, my fast and clean internet, and most importantly, my peace of mind. Sometimes, the best revenge is refusing to be bullied. Other times, it takes 6 enterprise routers and a solid knowledge of municipal transparency laws. Either way, I learned a truth I'll never forget. Bullies only win when no one stands up. And I stand up very well. But it wasn't quite over. 2 months later, Tyler knocked on my door again. This time, he was holding a handwritten letter. My mom made me write this, he said nervously, but I mean it. It was an apology for the 911 call, for everything. Thoughtful, proper grammar and everything. Thanks, Tyler, I said. Apology accepted. Internet treating you better now? Way better. We got fiber. It's actually faster than yours now. Good for you. I smiled. And remember, next time, just ask. Politeness works wonders. He grinned and sprinted home. And in that moment, I realized maybe, just maybe, the kid had learned something too. Margaret, as I hear, has been quiet ever since. Sarah's running a fair, transparent board. The community feels like a neighborhood again. And that Wi-Fi name? Still problem solved. A reminder to anyone who drives by. Sometimes the smartest revenge is simply not backing down.